Hey everybody, my name is Jeff Califa. I'm here with my business partner Jason Frank. We are part of Pinnacle Partners Group brokered by eXp Realty. Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Market Talk. Today we are joined by Home Inspector Ryan Sturzebecker of Alliance Home Inspections. Welcome, Ryan.
Hello. Thanks for having me,
Welcome.
guys.
Welcome, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
So today we just want to go over the process. What is a home inspection? How does that operate? Where does it come into play? And really just, explain it to the public. What do you do and what are you looking for? So with that, Ryan, I'll kind of let you take the lead and go over the processes for us.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having us. We love sharing information. So ideally, that's what we want to do. A home inspection, in simplest terms, is what they consider a non-invasive visual, basically overview of the operation of what goes into a house, and not just what goes into the house as far as the building structure, but also how to kind of maintain and help operate a house. So through the inspection process, where the state obviously has given us a set of standards, which essentially are like the guidelines or rules, because we don't go by municipal codes. So the set of standards that New Jersey puts forth is basically the breakdown of what they want us to look for. And then on top of that, it breaks down further into, okay, well, if you see one item, what might be the cause, right? So we don't actually go around fixing things, and we really don't even guarantee what the cause of certain things in a house are, but we need to point them out.
Right.
So it's they say non-invasive because we can't rip apart homes. We can't see what we can't see.
Right.
But we're looking for essentially hints and clues of if there's a moisture stain on a wall, okay, where might it be coming from and how can we remedy it? So we want to give as much information as possible, so that way if any contractors, handyman, plumbers, electricians, all these people that get involved in doing repairs have a better understanding of kind of what they're looking at.
Okay.
So a home inspection essentially it's just a big overview. A lot of people kind of put it into different perspectives or levels, as far as I'm worried something's going to get missed. Am I going to get sick in this house? Like, a lot of thoughts go into the process of owning a home. And the inspection is really just a big overview of that. And then there's additional things that can be done to take the next step, as far as like testings and samplings and things like that go above and beyond the general standards. But it's basically a big overview. We want to walk through the house and give the buyers as much information as possible about kind of what's going on in the current state.
Gotcha.
We can't tell the future. We're not mind readers. We can't see through walls. We don't have magic powers. I'm a homeowner just like everybody else. There's issues in my home and other houses I've had that pop up down the road. Things happen. I had a furnace blow up on me 2 days before Christmas 3 years ago. So so it happened. Things happen to us too, and the agents. So it's really just focusing on giving the customers as much information as they can, so they have at least a clear head on what they might be able to expect.
Right. So you're almost kind of giving them like a report card, like, hey, like you said, here's the current status of the house. If there's any issues that you potentially saw, this could be the cause of this issue. And then you almost kind of do like a threat assessment. Is this a big deal, or can this be easily fixed and stuff like that? So
Ryan,
exactly.
And you
So
do categorize things in your reports, right? I mean, so
yeah, exactly.
Right.
There's a lot of reporting softwares out there, and generally the basis of how most home inspection reports work are very similar as far as how we categorize. I'm very visual, obviously, with certain things, so I put a little bit more pictures into our reports than maybe necessary, just so if somebody's looking at an item, they're not confused about where in the house it is or what it is. So we'll add extra shots that show more details, just to, again, make the clarity of what we're looking at. a little bit easier to get through.
Yeah.
And we categorize and we color code everything. So,
Right.
we'll break down general deficiencies or damages we see that may need to be addressed now, prior to the closing of the house, especially if there's any health risks or real bad safety hazards, plumbing, leaking issues that we want to get fixed immediately, or like safety issues with electrical. There's a lot of different avenues, but we essentially are putting together a home guide for everybody. That's how I break the reports down. So it's like a 2-phase report. We're going to go through the standards and break down everything that should be noted and addressed, as far as what the state wants us to look for, that we need to do just to do what our job is. And the other half of the report that I build is essentially a home guide for people. So it's not all bad information like a lot of people start to think it is, where it's just a list of fix this, fix that. But we break down where certain things are in the house that you might need to know about, how to operate certain switches, shutoffs, gas valves, doing service intervals, preventative maintenance on HVAC equipment. So a lot of things that people, think, all right, I got a list of 10 or 15 items that my inspector pointed out that we want to get fixed. And then they'll say, okay, the seller decides to fix half of them and we're going to worry about the other half when we own the house. But above and beyond any fixes, unless you're in the business of moving in and out of homes very quickly to turn a profit or flip or whatever the case may be, you're going to be there a while is the idea if you're buying a house, right? So you need to know 6 months down the road, a year from now, 5 years from now, how to keep that home healthy. Because even a brand new construction can look great, and then 6 months to a year later, it can start to essentially fall apart in certain avenues of a home because you just didn't kind of keep up with a certain aspect.
Gotcha.
And I think the financial burden is obviously a big one as well. So we're trying to give everybody as much information to hopefully save them as much as possible, or at least spend their money in a smart manner to protect their investment. Because a home can be viewed as a home for your family, but it does come down to dollars to an extent. So we want to protect everybody's investment and then help them kind of get their on the right path of keeping a home as healthy as possible.
Right.
Gotcha. So when you show up to a house, what should a new first-time home buyer do? Can you kind of like walk us through the process of like you meet the client at the house and you kind of give them a brief overview of what you're going to do? Should they follow you around, or what's the process look like for that?
I personally enjoy when people follow me around, and I break it down that way when I do our introduction, as far as if they really want to get a good visual idea of what's going on before they have to deal with reading through a report. The best bet is to follow me around, because I want people to ask me questions. I want to be able to point and put their physical eyes on things while we're in the home, so that when they get the report, it's almost like a review. It shouldn't really be a major surprises. A lot of times you hear that the inspection went pretty well, and then the customer gets the report and boom, there's all these items that nobody knew about.
Yeah, that should never happen.
It really shouldn't. And I tell people right off the bat, we do review every picture we take. We analyze everything second time, just to make sure we're not going to skip out, again, mostly on the benefits of like the home guide portion of our report, to let them know like how many tips can I give you above and beyond doing general fixes that's going to help you make your life in this house a lot easier. So we want people to follow us around. Personally, the time frame that a home inspection takes too is especially in today's market with how crazy everything's been the past couple of years, is the home inspection is probably the longest the client's going to spend in the house prior to it being theirs. We hear like the open house stories. Oh yeah, I was at open house with 60 other people, and I got to look at the house for 3 minutes, and I have to commit to spending $500,000 or more, or whatever the case is. So the time frame of the inspection is I'm there to do my job and educate the buyers on what the house is, but it's also some time for them to kind of get a good feel of what's going on in the house as well. So I'd say it's a good balance or mix of follow me around, hover over my shoulder. That doesn't bother me at all. I don't get affected by what I'm looking at based on who's talking to me. And I like educating people. So giving them the opportunity to just ask as many questions as possible is really the best bet, because it's their comfortability and understanding the service that I'm providing that's important. So it's not just, okay, I made sure I checked off my list, I checked this, I checked that, I didn't miss anything. It's more or less, how can I help make sure it's clear to the buyer.
Right. Gotcha. So when you show up and you obviously do an introduction with the client, do you start on the outside of the house? And when you do start on if you do or don't start on the outside of the house, what are you looking for?
So I do typically start on the outside of a home, unless it's downpouring, like we got a little bit of rain today. It's not too bad, but if it's pouring outside, I'll see if I can wait to let the weather lift up a little bit. But I do like to go around the exterior of the home first, so that way certain things that might be on the exterior, I'll know where to look at the interior side of the house when I get into it.
Gotcha.
So from an outside perspective, just to give you the overview of what we look at on the outside of a home, the breakdown of the structure itself, and the grading, the lot that the home sits on. But we're looking at, siding, grading, divot points, holes, gutters, roofing, windows. It's a lot, right? But the big overview is just making sure that anything that has anything that's going to have any type of seasonal changes, to me are a little bit more important. So breaking down, like during rainy seasons and snow seasons, or spring season when everything starts to melt, where all that water is going to go that sat there all winter long from 2 feet of snow and ice on the yard.
Right. So you're looking at obviously the grading of the property, make sure that water is dissipating away from the house. And also you're looking at downspouts and gutters, if they're properly directed where they need to be. So they're not, the water's not rushing up against the foundation to create any, issues or anything like that. But those also could be indicators of when, say, the house does have a basement. Those indicators are, hey, maybe I'll look in this corner and see if there's any, the walls are saturated or anything like that as well. So
yeah, exactly. So the overview, we have to check off what we're looking at on the exterior as far as pieces of the house. But I'm also looking for clues and indicators of what I will see once I get into the inside. So and that's, water is the most common issue in most homes. And it can be the most damaging. So like I said, we can't see what we can't see. So I can't dig around the outside of somebody's foundation during an inspection. Unfortunately, I wish we could get to an extent where things like that made the perfect scenario for everybody. But, we're looking for the indicators. So, negative grading, gutters that they're ensure they're going to lead further away from the house. If there's below grade drainage systems involved, that they're not backing up or clogged, and we can see where the exit point is. So that way, once I go through, and whether it's a basement or a crawl space that we have to get into, we're going to see any indicators of staining, moisture, damage, current water with the rainy and snow season that we've had with our weird weather that we deal with, where it snows and then it turns 60 the next day and everything melts.
Right.
So we start at the exterior, really just to give ourselves a big overview of what I'm going to look at on the interior side. A lot of things that come down to finished surfaces or siding or soffit boards or fascia, like these are all pieces of a house, right? So a lot of times they can be replaced or be fixed or be covered or be patched. So we'll know obviously what should be done as far as each section. But to me, the overview of the outside of the house is kind of going to give me the better indicator or story of what's going on to the interior side.
Right.
And then vice versa, once I get back through and go through the interior side, I may see something on the interior wall where the exterior didn't actually look like there was any kind of concern. So then it's taking the next step and then going back out, figuring out, okay, what did I miss? The grading doesn't look bad, but I see some sort of moisture staining on a corner of a foundation. And then, you may realize that, okay, this extension of the gutter downspout looks newer than the downspout itself. So maybe for the past 15 years, water was just pouring in this corner, but now it's actually being led away. So certain things we see in a home aren't always indicators of ongoing issues. A lot of times there's just remains of prior fixes that people didn't get to patch up, paint, or try to remove staining and things like that.
Gotcha.
When it comes to the roofs, Ryan, like what, do you go on the roof?
I do. Unless it's a point where the ladders don't reach or the pitch is just an unsafe surface to walk on, I tend to be a little bit more old school as far as wanting to touch things. Now I know we talked about a visual inspection because that's just how it breaks down as far as what the standards for an inspection are. Inspectors certainly can go above and beyond that if they choose to. Not to say I want anyone to get into avenues and talking about things that they're not really qualified to talk about, but the visual part essentially is giving us our overview of what we're looking at. But for me, the touch and feel of certain parts of a house can tell me more, obviously, than just looking at it. So I still climb roofs. I don't use drones, unfortunately. I know a lot of people like to use them. I may use one down the road. I feel like if I can access it with a ladder, I want to be able to walk and feel and touch things. And if I can't, I have cameras and lenses and binoculars that are going to give me the bigger overview picture if I can't get up there. But we do like to walk the roof because shingles can look great, and then you can step on a soft spot that you would never know was there if you weren't able to touch it. And then getting an up close look and feel of, flashings around edges, around chimneys or other roof penetrations, the little rubber boot collar gaskets that go around a plumbing stack. It may look great from a little bit of a distance, but when you get up close, you can start to see where the dry rot and stretch packs are that you might not have been able to see if you weren't able to climb the roof. Now, in the winter, I'll say I don't climb as many roofs because of snow and ice, and we do want to try to be safe because if I get hurt, then I can't help people.
Santa climbs the roof in the winter, man. Why can't you?
I mean, I do. If I see dry spots, I'll hop over some snow here and there. I'm sure. But mostly we do climb the roofs, or at least at a minimum, if I can at least get on a higher pitch or steeper pitch roof that it's not going to be safe to walk without any type of harness. At least if I can get to the gutter level and see kind of how everything's flowing off the shingles and get a closer visual of the current state of the shingle itself, gives us a better idea. And again, the touch for me is important because a shingle can look perfect, but when you go to touch it, you'll feel any type of dry rot or stiffening to a point where that's going to indicate, okay, maybe it's starting to age a little bit more than we thought.
Right.
But yes, so
yeah, but there's also so many, like, people say like, oh, it's a 30-year roof or 40-year roof. I mean, obviously it really depends on the signal of the manufacturer, but the environment plays such a huge role in the lifetime of a roof, depending on if there's a lot of vegetation that is keeping a lot of moisture close to the house, or the sun doesn't hit it in certain aspects. And it can really, like, one side can be great in great condition, but the backside, because it's not getting enough sun or not enough ventilation around the house, can deteriorate the shingle faster. So you can have two different sides of the moon almost on a house. Would you say that correct?
Yeah, no, and that's 100% true because and I can tell you a quick story just to kind of give an idea of that thought process of the visual part. But yeah, so we're looking at things surrounding the house as well. So when I say the lot or the grading, as far as soil at the base level of a foundation, we want to make sure everything's pitched away from the house. But the surroundings around the rest of it, as far as any type of overgrown shrubs, large trees, obviously we deal with a lot of trees here in New Jersey. So we're looking for overhang spots, things that are going to actually physically overhang the house or the siding edge that could cause damage or debris that then will grow into like a moss-like growth or an algae growth that's going to hold a lot of moisture and can wick up underneath the shingles that'll start to deteriorate them a lot faster than they should. But we go, and again, in New Jersey, we go through so many seasonal changes that the weather is just crazy. So the temperatures can adjust or affect the shingles itself as far as the lifespan. But you've got shade points, rain, UV light just from the sun, whether it's winter, summer, fall, doesn't matter. All these things are going to affect a shingle in a different way that can essentially affect the overall lifespan of the shingle. So a normal like 30-year shingle could actually last longer than 30 years. That's just the age, the time frame that a manufacturer has to put on the shingle that they make, that it's the expected life expectancy. So similar to a car warranty, a new car is going to come with a 5-year, 60,000 mile warranty, whatever the number is. It doesn't mean your car is literally going to fall apart after 60,000 miles.
Depending
but
on
it
the
usually
brand.
does. It usually does.
They can. I mean, we drive 30,000 plus miles a year, so they do break down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But there's different things that affect the lifespan. So if you're in a wide open field with no tree coverage, no shade points, you've got a really good pitch where water's going to flow off the house properly, good gutter system that's going to make sure everything's going to lead everything away and not fill up or wick underneath a drip edge or anything like that at the gutter level that then can wick up the rest of the shingles. You can get well over the average lifespan of what a manufacturer says a shingle can do. A lot of times it also comes down to the aesthetic of what people see. And this is where I'll quickly get into that story. So a lot of times the visual part is, oh, well, if there's moss or growth or algae on a shingle, it's dead, it's bad. You can't fix it. But there's a lot of companies that do very, very good algae treatments of roofing shingles that will dry rot and kill any growth off and slowly wash off after the next couple of rainstorms that can help prolong the life of a shingle. And that's a lot of times what we recommend. Even if a shingle is looking like it could be 20 years old or more, but the interior side, let's say, of the attic shows me that there's no signs of moisture intrusion, there's no signs of water getting in, there's still really good airflow through the attic. That's not going to also offset the change in the exterior side. That you can clean these shingles, you can clean them. Right. So I did a townhome a couple of years back in a development not too far from here, and I had known just from the seller explaining to me that the couple of the neighbors in this block of townhomes had all redone the roof within the past, I think it was like 8 to 10 years, something like that. But the unit that I was inspecting for the client happened to be on the corner where it was surrounded by heavier trees than the rest of the building. So their side of the shingles had a lot of moss growth. And there was a lot of other wood damage around like the chimney stack, that indicators of, okay, we have an ongoing moisture issue, things aren't drying up fast enough. Let's get a company out here to address and fix it. So, maybe a month or two after she closes, she calls me up and says, there's a roofing company that says I have to replace a roof. Why would they be saying that? And I said, maybe he's working in the area, maybe he's doing other jobs and he's just doing his promotion to go around to all the neighbors and say this. And she said, well, he said, based on the look of the roof, it's probably over 20 or 30 years old because of all this growth that's on there. And we should just essentially replace it now so we don't have to deal with more issues later. Little did the guy know that the roofer didn't know that the roof was only 8 to 10 years old. So physically looking at something, you can't really always gauge the age of things or the actual state or the integrity of what's going on until you take a closer look. So come to find out that she dug a little deeper and just asked, and he said, well, essentially I'm doing so many jobs in your neighborhood that I'll give you a discount if you do it now. So he was just trying to convince her to replace her roof because that's what he wanted. That was his job, and trying to sell her on something. Right. but explaining it to her like, oh, your roof is going to leak, you're going to have all this damage because there's moss. That happens. It's a bad tactic, but it's it's a sales thing. You know, it's people are out there to make money, unfortunately. So, going from saying, okay, you have to replace your roof, but when you still have 20 years left on average on something like that, if you just maintain it the proper way.
Right.
So a lot of things, and again, it comes down to like ongoing upkeep of being a homeowner. So explaining that if you start to see a leak or a drip here or there, you really don't have to tell people they need to replace their entire roof because they see a leak or a drip. It means wherever that water is intruding from needs to be repaired. It doesn't mean you have to go rip your house apart to fix one spot.
Right.
And as for home buyer, like for first-time home buyers, it's a big question, especially in a market like this where sellers tend to have a little bit more of the advantage because the inventory is so low that the sellers may say, oh, well, we're obviously not going to replace our roof. We're selling the home as is. But if I can kind of do my job thoroughly to say, even if the exterior looks like it's a bomb zone, but if I can get through the interior and show the client that there's no moisture, there's no signs of intrusion, the aesthetic of a shingle does not matter as far as general functionality, unless there's real deterioration there, and that they're doing their job, they may be able to buy themselves another 5 years to take care of maybe a higher priority interior issue where, you know, they have to redo a kitchen or a bathroom or change the layout of the house a little bit to make it work for their family. So I feel like just taking that extra step to go a little bit beyond just the idea of a visual inspection tends to help explain things a lot more down the road.
Right. So the homeowner should not jump on the roof and power wash the roof. Would you say that's correct?
Yes, correct. And I will say this. There's two places I don't like clients to follow me around a house on an inspection. One is the roof. Please do not climb my ladder and come on the roof with me. You might get hurt and my insurance company is not going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Two, please don't come into attics with me either, because I have the comfortability of walking through an attic that may not have flooring. But I have had a case where a client refused to accept the fact that they shouldn't come in the attic, and they put their foot through the ceiling.
Oh boy.
And it, you know, luckily they didn't get hurt, and everything was, we figured it out, and everything got fixed, and they, you know, they still ended up buying the house and all that stuff.
Well, they broke it. They got to buy
there's
it.
certain things that there's a reason I'm there to do my job. So you can ask questions, and I'll gladly talk to you and look down while I'm standing in an attic or on a roof to still give you the full effect of explaining what I'm looking at. But yes, do not climb roofs if you're a homeowner and you're not comfortable, and definitely don't power wash a shingle because you will destroy it.
Yeah. So
when I say there's companies out there that will treat and clean roofs, it's considered a soft wash. And oftentimes there are soft scrub brushes involved. There's still hose water and a little bit of pressure there, but you really don't want to get on a roof and start blowing a couple thousand PSI of pressure against a shingle.
Yeah, you'll take all the granules off and really age that roof quickly, for sure.
Yeah, you can kill a 30-year roof in 2 years by power washing it. So
yeah. All right. So we did the outside, you did an outside inspection. You're most likely checking out, you know, if there's any leaking around the hose connections or anything like that, and also checking the outlets on the outside. When you go into the house next, what are the first steps with that? Are you checking all the outlets, the light switches underneath the sink, or like, what's your process when you walk into the house?
So I prefer like just a room by room check. It mentally allows me to create a blueprint of the house as I walk through it. Like I said, I'm very visual. I take a lot of pictures. Our average report has somewhere between 30 to 50 pictures in it, give or take, depending on the size of the house and how many items we're pointing out. But I take anywhere from 150 to 250 pictures of every house I go into, because again, I'm trying to be as thorough as possible and making sure that I can give the clients all the information they need. So, so I personally go room by room. checking off what I'm in there to look at. So, we're looking at walls, we're looking at the ceilings, we're looking at any type of stress or settlement cracks that could be normal just based on the weather we deal with and the season changes, where wood and framing of a home is going to tighten or expand, depending on what time of the year it is, that could cause those drywall cracks that you see. I've probably got one somewhere in this room. But we're looking at all that. We're checking the electrical to make sure outlets are wired the way they should be. Making sure there's cover plates, like even the simple things, like an outlet cover plate, it costs less than $1 at Home Depot. But we don't want kids crawling up to outlets and sticking their fingers in there. So we're looking at that. Windows are another big, obvious concern in homes because of the price point to have certain repairs done as far as windows go, or replacements in a market like this. So we're looking at the functionality of the window. We're making sure the seals are in decent shape if they're double pane glazed windows, and the functionality. So if a window opens, is it going to stay where I need it to, or is it going to drop because a cord or track is bad that could break somebody's finger? And I've actually done that, explaining this to people as I tell stories. There's certain things that I do in my habit of going through a home where I repeat a lot of the same stories because they're like little education notes that I make. So, when you go to open a window and if you let go and it drops, there's an issue obviously with the track not holding the sash in place, or there's a cord or a broken chain, something that's causing that window not to stay where I want it. And most people, when they open their windows, they open the bottom sash up. Now on a double hung window where both pieces of the glass can move, the same situation can happen with the top sash when a window gets unlocked. So if the top sash cords or track goes bad and you unlock a window and that top sash drops, it can still hurt somebody. And I've actually cracked one of my own knuckles telling the story because I wasn't looking at the window when I did it. So I'm telling somebody the story about how we don't want kids' fingers to get crushed under a window sash. And I look away and I unlock the window, and that fast, the top sash dropped and crushed my finger between the two pieces. And now that's another story I tell to people. But, we're looking at all the overviews of the house, room by room. So that's just how I personally do it. Some people like to go through a home and check all the plumbing first, then go back and check all the electrical. Everybody has their process. But I feel like if I can walk a client through each room, bedroom, living room, dining room, and then I do second floor, attic, and then I do basement last. And I'll explain in a second why I do that. But if I go room by room and I'm crossing off everything in my head and giving everybody the visual of each section of the house, instead of saying, oh, well, the plumbing up here needs this, the plumbing down here needs this, and then you go around and explain the electrical, it can make the process a lot longer in general, but people get very confused. So a lot of my clients, they like to take notes, and I'll tell people take as many notes as you want. So that way, when you do get my report, if there's anything that you don't see in my report based on the thoughts of the note you wrote down, we can kind of cross-reference and review that. But the room by room setup for me is a lot easier. So the process of me doing each room on each floor, the reason I go first floor, second floor, attic, and then all the way down is mainly so I can check the plumbing in the house. So it's just how I like to check the plumbing. So I want to run everything on the first floor. I want to go upstairs and run everything on the second floor. I want to check then the attic to see if there's any moisture intrusions that are going to come down based on what I've seen on the second floor. And then after I run all the plumbing, flush the toilets, run the showers, sinks, all that fun stuff, then I'll run back down to the basement because I'll see if there's any signs of plumbing concerns or leaks in the basement. A lot of basements may have active running plumbing as far as like a basement slop sink or a secondary kitchen or bathroom. But all the rest of the plumbing in the house has to flow down to go out. So that's my process. It's over the years, I've kind of tweaked how I go through a house a little bit here and there, but it stays pretty consistent in if I can walk the client through each section, and then we can essentially cross that part off the list, then it just makes the flow of everything a lot easier for people to understand. You know,
Mm.
if I'm at a house, and there's cases where I do inspections where the client can't be there, you know, I can obviously move through a house a lot quicker because I'm not repeating or explaining things as much.
Right.
But it's the same process for me. I'm going to do each room by room in the order that I like to do it, based on the layout of the house, where I
Mm.
think things are going to move through a house, and then do the floors. And then I go to the exterior again to do one more loop based on what I've seen on the interior side, to make sure I didn't see any secondary things that I missed. And then we can break everything down and put it together into the report.
Nice.
Awesome.
How, like, because obviously in our area we have a lot of older homes. Some that are built in the late 1800s or early 1900s, you know, and settling, you know, over that time period happens. How important is, you know, is settling normal? Is it something to be concerned about? Or what's your opinion on that?
It definitely is normal, based on the age of any home, whether a home is 40 or 50 years old, or 200 plus years old. There's going to be some sort of settlement, always. So,
Right.
you know, when a home is built, especially nowadays, there's a lot more technology obviously involved in what, builders and engineers and architects and planners and everybody go through when they're going to approve the location or build of a house. But
Mhm.
there's always going to be variables. So, you know, an engineer is going to do their job to determine okay, this is the size house we want to put on this lot, but based
Mhm.
on this soil, how compact it is, whether it's dirt, whether there's more clay involved, like all those variables are going to come into what an engineer has to do to put a house on a lot.
Mhm.
But they don't necessarily always know how the weight is going to actually, cause a reaction to the soil. So they do a very good job, just like everybody does, in trying to give everybody the most information. But there's always variables,
Mhm.
when you're going to put this much weight onto a lot.
Mhm.
Um, so essentially, what we're trying to break down for people, is the settlement, uh, a soft settlement, I'll call it, in a way that the house is just kind of getting into its place. And then
Mhm.
eventually down the road, there may be more settlement because, you know, the earth constantly underneath us is always changing and shifting and moving.
Right.
Um, but there, you know, we try to break down the difference in normal settlement and then a structural concern. So,
Mhm.
you know, if a floor is not completely level, on a newer home, then, you know, maybe we would indicate, okay, why did it move this much this fast? And
Right.
try to determine, you know, whether it's a crawl space or a floor, framing in the basement. If I see any signs of any shifting in posts, girder beams, rot from pests that can eat through, things that might cause something to shift or settle.
Mhm.
And then there's the to get to your point of the older homes that we deal with in New Jersey. The oldest home I think I ever went into was like mid 1750s.
Mhm.
Um, old, very obviously old, very old farmhouse, and every floor, if I can get my arm right, was
Yeah.
pitched about like this towards the center of the house.
Yeah.
And a lot of settlement you see in homes, if as you walk through a home, or once you get through and see kind of how the framing is put together, most homes do tend to settle towards the center of the house, because that's where the most stress or the weight is being held up by a beam or a post in the basement.
Mhm.
But there's a form of, settlement that happens in the wood itself, through time and age of
Mhm.
whether it's a new home and maybe the wood wasn't cured 100% and it's going to take time to dry, and it
Right.
may tweak a little bit based on the curing and drying process. But
Mhm.
then there's also just natural deflection that happens, in the framing of wood, that's going to cause even the horizontal side, um, I'm sorry, the vertical side of a floor joist will actually naturally bend without,
Mhm.
it being a structural issue. It's just a form of what would happen to that wood based on the amount of time it sat there.
Right.
So a lot of the crooked, and uneven flooring we see in homes isn't even a structural issue. It's just time.
Right.
Um, and
You
we do have,
find a house in
there's
the
floor.
1700s that has level floors.
Yeah. I
You
mean, I've
know?
literally walked through a room and almost had to put my hand on the wall before, because you do feel it in your feet.
Right. Oh yeah.
Um, and people use visuals. You know, I play a lot of golf, so I carry a golf ball around with me, and I'll show people if it's offset in a certain way where the pitch is actually leading to, so I can explain if I see an actual structure concern there. But yeah, so a home that usually I'd say within the first 15 to 20 years of a home being built, the ground should technically be settled in place where it is. But again, you know, variables change. Luckily in New Jersey, we don't deal with earthquakes like a lot of parts of the country do, but we do have a lot of soil changes and movement because of the seasons and the weather we have here. So, so if a home is going to settle and shift and the floor is offset and the house is only like 10 years old, okay, I'm going to have a little bit more questions about why that would have happened so fast. If I go into a house that's 150, 100 or 150, 200 years old, I may be able to feel comfortable enough to say, okay, well, this based on the amount of homes we've been through over the past however many years, this is just common with an older home. And that happens a lot. Like I said, even where our area that we're in, you know, there's a lot of 17 and 1800s homes. So it's a common question. And I feel like the understanding of different types of homes also needs to be put into perspective, because somebody that has never encountered an old home before, even as an inspector, may be freaked out when they walk through the house. Like, oh man, I don't know if I feel comfortable having like a client feel like they should buy this house. And that's a mindset game that we play as inspectors of you know, making sure that we're going to have everybody feel as comfortable and educated as possible. But there are certain times where if you don't just have the experience of dealing with an older home, you may look at it and be a little bit more inclined to say, okay, you know, this is terrible, or this is going to fall apart, or, you know, you have to call a structural engineer right now. You know, there's different steps that go into the process. And I'm lucky enough to live in an area that has a lot of old homes. So, and I just have a more of a love, I guess I'd say, for older homes and architecture.
I agree.
And the history of building. So it's something that I actually like going into more than I like going into a brand new XYZ builders cookie cutter box that we see a lot of these days. But it's same thing. It really comes down to just the explanation and the communication with the client in breaking that down.
Right. Like making sure obviously they understand that, you know, in this, if the house has been standing for 200 years and there's some settling, most likely it's fine. You know, if the floor is creaking, that doesn't mean the house is falling down. So yeah, I sold a mill that was built in 1840, and it was right on the Pequest River, and the thing was beautiful. And like the water ran under it. I'm like, it's not going anywhere. You know, this thing's been here 200 years. You know, it's not going anywhere.
Exactly.
So, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, so and again, the experience of that really does come into play. So it's, you know, we have our set, like I said, I refer to the word standards because that's just what we go by. We don't use codes, but we have our set standards that are regardless of the age of a home that we have to look at. But knowing and just going through different aged homes, your mind is going to well, as far as what I'm looking at, my mind gets preset to like, okay, I already know what to expect based on the decade this house was built in. But the communication of explaining that to the buyer. I mean, I do have people that go into an older style home and I can tell they seem a little bit freaked out. And, you know, it's not my job to tell somebody to buy a house or not buy a house. My job is there to give them all the information about the house so they can make their decision. And, you know, you as realtors and your attorneys, and that's what you guys do, because it's help kind of finalize the thought process there and deciding if it's a smart investment or not. But I can tell that there's certain people that maybe should not be looking at homes that are that old if they're that worried or that freaked out, because the stress of being a homeowner can be, feel like a job at sometimes. So
Sure.
if you're not interested in the history of an old home or the layout, or you're worried about creaky floors and certain things, then maybe there's a case where it shouldn't be that type of house that you're looking at. And I know in a market like this, I keep referring to that just because of how crazy it's been the past couple of years, but people are limited to the inventory and may not always have that choice. So taking that extra step as far as what I do in going that focusing on the communication side of those things can also help bring a freaked out old house buyer down to the realization that, okay, maybe it's not that big of a deal of what we're looking at.
Right. I mean, I've seen new construction where there are some serious settlement issues that should not be occurring in the lifespan of this house already. So, I mean, you can get an older house that might be, have settled already, but it's in really good shape and it's not going anywhere. And then you have a house that was built, 2 years, and all of a sudden, there's some serious cracks in the slab of the concrete. There's not only vertical cracks in the wall, but there's also horizontal cracks in the wall. So there's a lot of exterior pressure on the house. Yeah, age doesn't necessarily determine whether it's good or bad all the time.
Definitely not. Definitely not. And again, it comes down to, there's the aesthetics of a home are important because people have to have some sort of a like or a love or a feeling for what they're buying. Because when you're spending that kind of money, it's not, oh, the house is ugly, but I have to buy it. Like, I hope that people aren't put in that situation that often. But that is right. The age really doesn't matter. And to me, the reason I say I like older homes better is because you see a lot better design aspects in some of these older homes, and the thought of how they built it based on the time frame they were in is to me is really cool. But it shows a lot more love for the building process of a home when you go into a little bit of older home, because a lot of times these houses were built for families to keep forever, essentially passed down generation to generation to generation. I've done homes where the same family has lived in the house for over 100 years, and they just keep passing it down, and they want to keep it in the family. So so a little bit more passion, I'd say, for the building art of things happened back in the day. Nowadays, unfortunately, not to say people aren't doing a good job at building homes, but the speed of things that we need to get done in today's life does affect the overall craftsmanship of a lot of homes. And again, even coming down to like foundation issues, like I said, there's always, an engineer's going to do their job in making sure that the lot can handle the size house, the weight load, the differential and the pressure of things moving laterally or just, vertically up and down into the ground. But there's always a variable. So you could see a house that is brand new, just finished, and by the time they finished all the interior final cleanup punch list items on the house, there's already a structure issue. So we do see it all the time. Actually, when it comes to the age of a house, I try to explain that in the sense that it really doesn't matter. And it's a good thing to note for clients in today's market when things are moving so quickly. And the old school thought of a 14-day inspection period is really not that common anymore. Everything needs to be done in less than 10 days or a week. And people tend to skip over. I have a lot of people that do skip over certain aspects of the inspection because they think it's brand new, or that they don't need an inspection at all on a new construction. Can be a crazy thought process to me.
We recommend them, whether it's a brand new construction or it's built in the 1700s. I mean, always recommend a home inspection.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to know what you're buying as a homeowner, and really just to, again, we see a lot of the verbiage, home inspection for informational purposes only these days.
Yep.
You want to know what you're buying, right? The ins and outs. If there's any potential problems, make that checklist of things you want to, work on when you get back into the home.
Exactly. I mean, we see all kinds of, we see all kinds of crazy things. So, the 1700s and 1800s houses, I already know kind of what to expect when I walk into that kind of aged house, based on the type of wood was used, whether they even milled the framing of the house, or they're just big trees downstairs in the crawl space. So that is like almost easier. that's almost easier for me to kind of know what to expect.
Sure.
But when you go into let's say a brand new construction, and they could even still be finishing things, they may be
Right.
finalizing the backsplashes, and they have to go around and touch up some of the electrical and all that fun stuff.
Right.
But there's plenty of homes we go into, and all I do is run a sink, and
Yeah.
there's leaks underneath in the P trap. Like, how in my head, how does a builder get to that stage of letting me get to the house, knowing that I'm going to walk through and run everything, and they don't have their guys
Right.
kind of double check everything ahead of time as
Right.
a standard of their business practice. But
Listen,
that's the whole point of the home inspection, is
you're
because
doing the
they,
job for them. You're creating their checklist.
yeah. So we hope we don't find anything that's going
Yeah.
to scare them off from the builder itself, to think that the
Right.
builder did a bad job. But stuff does happen. So we find leaks. We find dead outlets all the time that haven't been hooked up the right way. But leaks, honestly, in a new construction are more common than any other issue I find, other than like some structure concerns that we'll see here and there. But even just general leaks at a waterline valve or something, there's a lot of changes that have happened in I'll say the tools people can use to put things together, especially when it comes to plumbing. You got a lot of shark bite and compression fittings that aren't soldered or sealed like old copper lines used to have to be. So
Right.
there's putting something together has gone good for builders and making their process a little bit faster. And some of the materials are better than what the old stuff was. But there's a lot more pieces that can cause issues in a lot of the new building materials that we use. So, going through a brand new construction to me is just as important as going through an old house, because
Right.
you're still spending X amount of dollars, and you're still putting you or possibly your family and your kids in this house, and you want to make sure everybody's as safe as possible.
Now,
Gotcha.
Ryan, I want to talk about something that, especially in our area, is pretty common, but can be very dangerous. It's not a 4-letter word, but it's close. It's a 5-letter word. That's radon. So common in our area, northwestern New Jersey. Whether the house is built in the 1700s or brand new construction, it's definitely a concern. You want to go into a little bit of detail about, what is radon, why is it concerning,
Yeah.
and not to scare people, but it is pretty easy to remediate too.
Yeah. So it can go both sides of that aspect. Like, yes, it's
Right.
very dangerous, but it is also relatively easy to mitigate and control.
Right.
So radon is a naturally occurring gas that comes from a uranium product in the soil and rock underneath us. And this kind of backs to what I was saying before about how the earth is constantly changing and shifting, whether we feel it or not. Things are happening below our feet.
Right.
So what it is, it's a odorless, colorless gas that basically escapes from the soil and will come up into the building envelope of a house. Whether you think your foundation is perfect or not, concrete is relatively porous. So there's still little things that allow gases to sneak through, even though you don't see any type of cracks, let's say in your basement slab. The gas will get in if it wants to. So it's a odorless, colorless gas, comes from uranium, and what it does is it deteriorates and breaks down lung tissue, very similar to the effects of smoking cigarettes. So the crazy part about it is that a lot of people don't know what radon is until you go to buy a house, or in our case, you go to sell a house and the seller finds out that they have radon.
Right.
But it's an everyday occurring thing. Especially it's a relatively higher on our side of the country as far as where we are, because we have a very rocky and crazy soil. But it escapes, and what happens is when it comes into a house and it's kind of restrained into the walls of a home, the levels can basically build up to a point where, as you're just living every day in your house, you're breathing it, and it's slowly causing an effect of lung tissue. So it's the number 2 cause of lung cancer in the country to smoking cigarettes. And it's something that most people probably have never heard of before,
Right.
which is
They
crazy.
just live in their house for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, never had any issues. People develop lung cancer, never smoked a cigarette in their day.
Yeah, and they don't understand. They don't even really understand why. And then somebody will finally think of that part of the process. Okay, did we check for this? And I've had.
I want to go over the importance of checking once you are in that home. you know, every year or two, just having a radon test done just to make sure things are staying consistent. And we actually have a story about this where I sold a property in Mount Olive
Yeah,
that my
I
clients
remember.
purchased. I mean, they bought the house 4 or 5 years earlier, and the radon came back like a point 0.4. It was very low.
Yeah,
Well, when the home inspector did the test on their property, it came back in the 90s, and they were
yeah,
freaking out.
Yeah.
So I called you up and I said, Ryan, can you do me a favor and drop another radon test? I want to have a radon test there to verify the results, because at the time we're
yep,
just using one canister, just to, you
yes,
know. Um, so that came back the same thing. It came back in like the 90s, and they're like, how did this even happen? How can this be possible that 4 or 5 years ago we were 0.4 and now we're in the
yeah.
90s, which is a pretty extreme number for radon levels.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and it happens so often that even above and beyond like the basics of just the thought process, like we say, normally people don't think about it, or they've been in a house 20 years. But in
Right.
that case, and I tell that story to people all the time and explaining that you really have no idea what can change. Now,
Right.
if you physically change or alter the house or the soil, that's a more obvious way
Right.
to release the gas. So if you ever put an addition on your house, or you dig a even digging a pool next to a house, disturbing that soil can allow things to travel below and
Sure.
in and around your house. So any changes to the house or around the house um, can open up these extra pockets
Right.
of radon. But even without that happening, and you could say, nope, I've only been in this house 3-4 years. I don't understand it. But that's why I say the earth is always moving and changing below our feet. You know, there's essentially an ocean of water below us too that we don't know about because we look down and we see dirt.
Mhm.
But things are flowing, things are changing. There's streams, there's rivers that flow beneath the ground that can release these pockets, which is also why radon is also in water, which is another thing that a lot of people don't realize. They think, oh, it's
Right.
just something that we breathe. But if there's high elevated radon levels around a house and you happen to have a well, there's a good chance that their radon could be sneaking into the water source, coming into the house.
Right.
And there's different treatments and
Mhm.
systems for that to help
Yeah.
pull the radon out of the water to make it potable and
Gotcha.
actual safe to use on your body and drink.
Right. Which
Um,
that's important to note, because, you know, while this is extremely dangerous and it's fairly common in our area, it can be fixed and remediated and eliminated, really. I mean, you know, after systems are put in place to, you know, eliminate the gas in your home,
yeah,
usually those
Mhm.
readings come, you know, they're in that 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 range, and it's pretty much non-existent at that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I think
like they say. They'll say it never technically is zero, but the labs will rate the lowest rating a lab can give is less than 0.2. So it's
Right.
almost zero, right?
Right.
But as low as humanly possible, that's what we're searching for. So
Right.
a mitigation system, essentially, to show the easy part of how they fix it is. The only thing that changes the system is really the size of the basement. If you have a 2,000 square foot basement, you may need different entry points to the system, but essentially
Right.
what they do is they dig a hole in your the floor of your basement or crawl space, or if you have a slab, I've seen them actually do it from the exterior side and dig underneath the house
Yeah.
from the outside to pull air from under the slab. But what it's doing is they're digging a hole, putting a pipe down, running it to the exterior, and now every system has to have when the system goes in, it has to have a fan put onto it, and it's 24/7 just going to relocate the air. It's not actually changing the levels of the radon gas, it's just moving it.
Right.
So when radon reaches a normal outside air, the amount of oxygen it can mix with kind of dissipates it to a point where we don't know of any common exterior cases really that are going to cause a lot of issues with radon. But
Right.
confined in the walls of a home where the buildup can happen and you're constantly breathing in and out is where it's going to affect everybody. So the systems essentially just relocate that air to the outside, and
Right.
they'll run a pipe up to a gutter or a roof edge line. So there's nothing above it that can cause any type of like backdraft to push anything back down, and just let the air dissipate. So you're just relocating it to the exterior, similar to what a sump pump does for water that comes into your house. It's just
Right.
moving the water.
Yep.
You can't always stop it from getting in the house, but if you can figure out a system that's going to help relocate it, to a safe exit point on the outside of the house, that's the best bet.
Right.
But again, outside of the real estate industry, unfortunately, people don't really learn about radon. If you look into it, every state has their EPA or their DEP department, and it's going to break some sort of information down. But you don't turn on the TV and see a lot of commercials explaining what radon is. So it's unfortunate that it is such a big killer in the country. It kills somewhere around an average of like 20,000 people a year. But you just don't know until you go to buy the house. Right. So then on the seller side, same thing. I've had clients that have actually been going through health issues, and then we do the test and find out that radon has been high, and it may not have been high the entire time they own the house. To get to our point of that past story, they do fluctuate. But it is a big health risk, and people that have find out they have lung cancer, and they're like, "How I'm a healthy person? I don't get it." And it's just because you were living in your house. So it seems like it's very scary, but the mitigation process to help relocate the air is relatively simple. And I think in all the years I've been doing this, I've only had one client, even with a system being put in a house, knowing that it was as low as possible, was so freaked out that they said they weren't moving to the state. They were from New York and they lived in high-rise buildings. So it's like, you come from different areas. You
completely foreign.
That too. We saw such an influx over the past couple of years of people moving from city areas out to us to get away from people. And they're learning about it for the first time, and they're like, I've never heard of it. And it's because, it doesn't exist when you're on the 50th floor in the city. They're
learning about radon, septic systems.
They learn about it all.
It scares the hell out of them.
And then, different areas of New Jersey does change. When you start to get to certain parts of central Jersey and the shorelines, and then further south, it does become less and less and less of an issue because there's so much sand buildup, not as much rock in the soil, that the levels can drop. So, it's I don't want to say it doesn't exist down the shore, but if you're down that area, there's less likelihood of radon gas hitting your house. But then, depending on where you live and where you're buying the house, kind of knowing the weather situations or different things that can change, like affect different parts of the house. So down south, you may not have to deal with radon, but you may deal with the salt water deteriorating everything on the outside of your beach house, or you're destroying your AC equipment. So depending on where you are, but our area specifically is known to have a relatively higher side of radon, and just again going that extra step and making sure we get every house tested. The only times I haven't tested homes is if I know a system literally was just installed, maybe because the seller was being proactive about it, because we do have that happen. I do a lot of pre-listing inspections before people even go to sell their house, where I give them the seller a walkthrough to explain certain things that maybe they want to address ahead of time. And we'll do just peace of mind radon testing for people, so they can be proactive in getting a system put in place, so they don't have to stress scaring a buyer away or whatever the case may be. And it helps kind of just educate everybody a lot better.
So Ryan, in addition to the general home inspection, and obviously you do radon tests, which now is the double canister, right?
Yes.
To make sure that those readings
last year they changed the New Jersey, and I everybody was kind of frustrated at first a little bit about it, because from a cost standpoint, for what I do, it literally doubled the cost of our tests. But I've always had it, I'd say almost actually since COVID, when everything started going crazy, and we weren't at a point where certain inflations that have happened economically in our country have allowed people to make more money, or whatever the case is. I started throwing radon in as just like a freebie of what I do. We used to charge as a separate service noted on our invoice for radon testing. But if I'm there for a general inspection, I'm going to leave a test of your house regardless. So we did switch to a double canister test, which again, everybody was a little bit frustrated about at first. But talking with the labs and finding out a little bit more about why, I came to found that New Jersey was actually one of the last states to change to a 2-can average system, and it really is just giving a better average. So the idea is making sure that the lab didn't mess up when they created the canister, because
Right.
it does, that can affect it. But then also just making sure that the house itself is going to pull into two different canisters just gives us a better knowledge of what the actual average levels may be.
Sure.
So we do a double can system. I leave one in every house we go into. Like I said, unless I know that there was just a system put in place, or if we still have high-rise buildings in New Jersey that are
Right.
condominiums or apartments, whatever you want to call them. So we won't test things that are typically above a second floor unit, because
Right.
it's just not going to have the chance it still will dissipate in the building envelope of a house.
Right.
So there's certain avenues we don't test, but we do the radon testing as something I just throw in with every house I go into, and I eat the cost of my tests on my end, just because I have a good relationship with everybody that we deal with, and I want to make sure everybody feels as safe as possible.
Good. So then home inspection, radon, what else do you look for? What other tests do you offer?
So the other service that I just include right off the bat with every house I go into is a wood destroying insect inspection. Again, in New Jersey, we deal with a lot of different insects and bugs that can that may just be a nuisance, but a lot of them can hurt the structure of a house. So we do deal with a lot of termites in New Jersey. And they're all subterranean, so they do come from the ground, and they move here and there, and they can eat a part of your house and then leave. They don't necessarily destroy your entire house like everybody always fears. But we include a radon and a wood destroying insect inspection with every house I go into right off the bat, just because I'm there. I'm already looking for signs of that stuff.
Right.
There's no reason for me to say, oh, no, we got to do this one separate, or vice versa. But so we do radon testing, wood destroying insect and termite inspections. We do sewer line scopes if you're on a city sewer hookup, which is essentially going to take a look at the internal view of the main sewer lateral, or the drain that leads from the house to your city hookup,
Right.
which is buried typically a couple feet below ground, and you can't obviously see into it unless we put our cameras down there. So,
Right.
And that's something that some people don't realize, that they have responsibility or ownership.
Right. You're responsible from the curb to into your house. So
yeah, exactly. So until it drops off into a bigger city sewer line, you have full ownership of that drain line. So we're looking for signs of damage, low points, bellies, clogging, tree roots. Again, because of where we are, we deal with so many different avenues of tree roots being strong enough to puncture the connection seams where two pieces of lengths of pipe come together. So whether it's a 100-year-old house or brand new with PVC or ABS or whatever kind of piping they're going to use, there are ways that tree roots can grow in, that damage can happen when they backfill and bury something, or if you had a pool dug in your backyard, and just the weight pressure of the machines running over your front yard may have caused a pressure point to cause damage. So the sewer line scopes we offer too, and again, it's a full video inspection from your house to the street. And then we don't do testing for certain other things that you come across in a home, like asbestos, but there's certain things that if I see it, I'm going to note it in our report that maybe you should get it tested. Right. So the state doesn't break down things like asbestos, mold, lead, radon. These aren't things that a state considers part of a general home inspection, which a lot of people don't realize. They think that, I'm going to walk into a house and tell them where all the lead paint is or all that stuff. And it's not included in a home inspection. Those are services that can go above and beyond the general scope. So we do offer a lot of those because, again, we want to make sure everybody's happy and healthy and safe. But the radon and termite are the two most common, sewer lateral scopes. And then I had mold sampling figured out a couple years back. And at the time, it just wasn't something I felt like I wanted to add another thought process onto my head of doing for people until I felt educated enough about it. But this year, we're reintroducing mold sampling for people, just to take that extra next step. If I do see it while I'm already at the house, I can take some sampling or leave a test behind for a couple hours while I'm in the house, and take that sample, get it dropped off to the lab, and then again educate people a little bit more on how to go about fixing certain things or mitigation or remediation of these items that you may come into contact with. I had the current house I'm in, the entire attic was filled with what people would call black mold when I bought it, or I'll say right before I bought it. And a lot of people don't go in their attics as homeowners unless you're going to use it for storage or you have HVAC equipment up there. A lot of people just never go up there until you go to move and you want to check to pull all of your stuff out. So that's exactly what happened. The sellers just never really thought to look up there and never realized that our thermostatic attic fan wasn't kicking on and off properly or set to maybe it just wasn't set to the right temperature. But the entire front face of the house was filled with mold because we have 100-foot oak trees surrounding our house. So there's a lot of shade points on the exterior that changes the airflow and structure of the interior side too. So, luckily we had it mitigated. I had it treated. It's not something that I personally think should necessarily scare somebody away from until you get to that next step of, okay, how do we fix it?
Right.
And that's part of what we're doing as home inspectors is the idea is not to scare people away. There's a lot of ego in different industries of avenues of where people come from. So they kind of exaggerate or like to animate their explanation to people of certain things that unfortunately do scare people away. But getting to that next step of how to fix it is really what it is. So we want to point it out and then help break down, here's who you should call, here's who we should talk to. If you want me to come back after they fix it, I'll re-look at it if you want me to, just to verify that it was done the right way. Taking all those extra steps in even all those other services of sewer scopes, radon, mold, asbestos, things like that people don't realize aren't necessarily included in a general inspection. We want to try to help everybody as much as we can.
Right. I bought a house that had mold in it. It was treated, but like you said, it's like you can treat something, but unless with mold or any situation like with moisture, you have to change the atmosphere around the house. You have to figure out what's causing it. So we bought the house, and I'm like, what caused this situation to happen? So I'm looking around, I'm in the attic, looking. They had a temperature gauge exhaust fan in the attic. I'm like, perfect. But I'm like, what could be it? What could cause it? And I look up and I see a 12-inch exhaust fan in my attic, and I'm looking closer. The exhaust fan, the hole in the attic was only 3 inches. So you have a 12-inch fan with only a 3-inch hole that was cut in the roof. And I'm like, what the heck? And I'm like, there's the answer. So I got up there with a Sawzall, cut it, put a cap on it, and nothing. Everything was fine from there. So we just changed the ventilation in the attic.
There's always there's a cause to every item or effect or whatever, cause and effect, right? So just because there was mold up there, we see it. I'm glad we caught it, or I'm glad you saw it. I'm glad I can find it for a lot of my clients. But figuring out why and where it's coming from. So it's an atmospheric change. So whether you've got bad airflow, you've got moisture leaking in from somewhere that's going to change the temperatures. Even just, again, I feel like I just say it over and over. In New Jersey, we really do deal with, people don't think that the seasons, but the weather changes that we deal with in the seasons can change a lot. So the idea of like winter, humidity is supposed to drop in the wintertime, but when we get these weird snows and then the next day it rains and then it hits 60 degrees, boom, there's all this humidity that's going to be around your house. And an attic fan not being set to the right temperature, and that's what happened in mine. It just wasn't kicking on when it should have because the temperature was set too high. So by that time it got that hot in the attic, the effect of the mold had already begun, So you have to find and take that extra step to figure out what's actually causing it. Similar to like finding a leak somewhere in a house. Okay, we found a leak, but where's it coming from? What is disconnected? What's broken? Or with the mold, we say, was the fan broken? Is there a hole in the shingles? Is there limited restriction around the soffits? Airflow, people shove insulation too far deep into the soffit and actually block the whole purpose of of a soffit airflow,
Right.
thinking that they're adding insulation to help their house and be more
Right.
efficient, but they're actually hurting it. So,
Right.
seeing all those things is really the big picture of the visual inspection. So, we're giving a big overview of everything, but also trying to figure out, okay, why or maybe why is this happening? And then that's why we back everything up. We're not repairmen, so I can't go through a house and point all this stuff out. And even if I was the best finish carpenter in the world and you wanted me to redo your kitchen for you, I'm not going to do that, because I'm there to point everything out for you.
Right.
And then you guys take that next step between, agents and attorneys, and you guys collaborate and figure out, who do we need to get into this house to either A, give us a quote to figure out how much it's going to cost, or B, how do we actually fix it? Not even necessarily just a cost, because
Right.
I try to see everything we can, but like I said, there's certain things that, because we're a generalized profession of looking at so many different things, the specific tradesmen in those individual aspects of what we're looking at may obviously have a better experience or education or thought process on how to fix certain things. So,
Right.
to get to that point, you noticed that you saw a hole, that it was restricting the airflow of the size of the fan that should have been running through your attic.
Yeah.
But a lot of homeowners are clueless in that aspect, and they really just don't know what to do or who to call or what to break down. So us giving all that information, we'll say, okay, we do recommend calling a plumber, or I do recommend calling a landscaper to help with the grading issues around the house.
Right.
Or electrician, all these different things. We're trying to help guide you in how to get to that next step and figuring out the 2 points. How do we fix it? How much is it going to cost? And then you decide, okay, is this the house for us? Certain people get scared just from the inspection part of the process. Unfortunately, like I said, people can scare their clients because maybe they're just passionate about what they're looking at, but it comes off the wrong way, and you don't even get that stage to be able to say, I'll have a plumber come out and look at it and find out it really wasn't that big of a deal. So,
Right.
we try to limit what we say about certain things, because it is our job to point it out and help and guide. But again, it's not our job to tell people how much things are going to cost to fix. A lot of inspectors will give estimates or gauges. But in New Jersey, we really shouldn't be doing that as part of our standards of practice. We're not supposed to give estimates or even remaining life on things. So if I see that a roof is 20 years old, I can't say that you have 10 years left on this roof.
Right.
I mean,
the roof could be brick. You may, but
right. That's you predicting the future. You can't, right? There's so many variables.
I wish I was a superhero, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Also want to go back, like some, correct me if I'm wrong, but some homeowners think like the house should be so buttoned up and insulate, like everything should be super tight, which it has its pros and cons. Like, would you agree that a house sometimes also needs to be able to breathe as well?
Yeah, they do. They definitely need to be able to breathe. And that comes in different aspects of home. So to get back to our window story from before, we're checking the functionality of every window, but aside from just the general functions, I do want to make sure that they function for the fact that so people can use them. So we go into a home and I can tell that the homeowner hasn't opened their windows in 20 years because they're stuck and the frame shifted and settled with the house, like we talked about. And that causes a window to get stuck. And then they're like, I don't really use my windows anyway, so I'm not going to get it fixed. And then it just makes the problem worse and worse the longer they sit there. But you do want to let a house breathe. It's an envelope, so it can pack in a lot of pressure when you're not going in and out constantly. Normal entry and exit out of a front door, a garage door, or a back slider is great. But if you can go around the house and let the house breathe in different seasons, will help keep the functionality of the house in better standing. As far as like windows go, use them to let the natural air come in and out. It's not just about breathing fresh air, because some people have allergy issues. They can't open windows, but you still want to let the house breathe, because there's a lot of pressure in our framing Again, the humidity changes that we go through affect the house, and in a lot of times in winter when that humidity drops and all the wood in the house is going to feel like it has to stiffen up and tighten. That's where you'll notice maybe in the wintertime your closet door hits the edge of the frame a little bit when you go to close it, but you're like, oh, I never really noticed that long. And then you realize, okay, in summertime when everything kind of like settles back out, there's a little bit more moisture out in the air. That door, same exact door, different part of the year, may open and close perfectly.
Right.
So, you know, you deal with that. And then the insulation side of things, like I said, people think they have to overpack and overstuff insulation in places to feel like the more you can get in there, the better it's going to do. But the actual functionality of an insulation should be airy, because you want to let certain airs move through insulation and vapors. You're not creating just like a solid wall. You actually want airflow to go through certain parts of a house, but it's controlling the level and the direction. You know, insulation may have a vapor barrier on one side, whether it's paper or plastic, whatever the case is, because you want to stop certain things from getting in, but you still want the air in the house to be able to flow through the insulated part.
Right.
So there's different avenues. So you definitely want to let houses breathe. You know, in the nicer months of the year or winter when it hits 60, you know, open the windows up a little bit, let the house kind of get some fresh air if you can. And then that also gets you in the habit of going around your house and, again, checking the functionality of certain aspects of the house that you might not think of. You know, if you have a house where you've got an extra formal living room that you really never use unless you have company over, you may not be going into that room that often, or opening the windows or checking the outlets to make sure they're not loosening or things like that. So creating habits of, like I said, I break this down going into like the home guide section of our report, is like habits of being a homeowner, and breaking down. And then eventually it really does just become habit. So, you know, even in my own house, my eyes just go to certain things as I walk through rooms. Or when I go to a mall, or when I go to somebody else's house, like I'm literally anywhere I go, I'll notice something because it's become such a habit in wanting to look at things and try to figure out, okay, what's the situation here? Again, it takes time. You know, a lot of people get freaked out, especially if you're first-time home buyers and you've never dealt with the need of actually going through of doing all the maintenance and preventative maintenance and services and all these fun things that go into the fact of being a homeowner. But creating that process and giving everybody the idea, okay, maybe just stick with some of our guidelines, and then from there you can branch off, and eventually it just becomes habit. You know, by the time you've lived in a house for a year, and it could take that long for you to realize where certain things are. I've had customers call me up and they're like, I know I see where this is, but I really don't know what I need to do with this and that. And, you know, we're here to help people. So, giving everybody the good head start is the biggest idea.
Right. We're running up here on time. What is the best way for people to get in contact with you?
So social media has become our biggest outlet. As far as any type of contact or just kind of learning about what we do. We try to post a lot of good informational stuff on there periodically throughout the seasons too, what to do in spring, spring checklist, winter checklist, different avenues. So social media is probably the best because you're going to get the biggest amount of information off of us. And Instagram for me personally being the biggest one. I don't do TikToks yet. Maybe I will. I'm not sure, but
dancing on the roof. Start dancing on the roof.
Yeah, I do little videos here and there on Instagram of certain things, explaining things while I'm at a house. But social media is the best platform to either to get in touch with us, aside from phone calls and emails and meeting awesome agents like you guys. But the social media is the best bet to get probably the widest range of communication and information out of us, because we're posting constantly on different things we're doing, different services we're changing, and then, like I said, different educational videos. So even if you're not necessarily in the market right this second to buy a house, we still want to try to teach people what's going on out there in the industry.
Makes sense.
We'll link everything, all your socials in the video. Your website we'll also do. That's inspectwithalliance.com. Yeah. And Ryan, we really appreciate your time today, man. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We could definitely break down. There's so many more avenues where we could go into a lot more specifics of
Sure.
certain aspects. I'd be happy to break down different electrical, plumbing, roofing, all that fun stuff down the road if there's a
Sure.
need to drop that to your viewers. But definitely, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
Hopefully, somebody out there will get some sort of a benefit about hearing me ramble on about this stuff. But the idea is, I say this, as far as a home ownership, there's no perfect house.
Right.
Everything can be fixed. It's just a matter of figuring out the steps and the financial needs to do so. So just really focusing on educating yourself as a home buyer moving forward, or even if you've been in your home for 10 or 15 or 20 years, you may be able to learn something new.
Yep.
So we're happy to help everybody and just try to educate everybody as much as possible.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. Really appreciate the information. We'll definitely have you back on. And yeah, maybe we can just focus on one topic next time, and we can share that with everyone just so they know what to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks, Ryan. We appreciate your time today, man. I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Take care, man.
All right.